Hello and welcome back to the Crafty Concepts with Erin YouTube channel. I'm here today with the creative design team and we are bringing you lots of ideas for using one stamp of 3 different ways. The stamp set I'm going to be using today is called Coffee Helps. This is so cute. If you're a coffee fan, you're going to love this one. It was a must-have for me. But you can see there's lots of different little cups and a little bag of coffee. There's the beans and then tons of sentiments that are just really fun. I don't need an inspirational quote. I need coffee. Or today's good mood brought to you by coffee. Life happens, coffee helps. Strong like my coffee, and there's nothing I wouldn't brew for you. Everything shaded in this kind of bluish green color has a coordinating thin cut. The stamp set is available without the thin cuts if you prefer, but I always like to have the thin cut options. They come all packaged together here. The thin cuts come on their own magnetic sheet for storage, so that is always very nice. And then we have our little foam pad that comes with each stamp set for stamping, but I'm going to bring in my Versamat here in a moment. I do want to show you in the May and June 2022 catalog. You can find this stamp set here towards the back, and they have created a double page scrapbook layout with it. So I think this is really cute what they've done here. Let me hold it up so you can get a better look there. But you can see how on the side here they've used those little quotes and icons to create little embellishment clusters and then added a few down here as well. And I thought that was a clever idea, but I'm going to create a scrapbook layout and show you how, 3 different ways that we can use this stamp set. I want to show you these cards too because they're just so adorable. These were designed by a fellow maker, Kelly Baxter Fitzgerald, and I love what she did and I had to recreate them. But this is the Hope and Kindness collection and that fancy doily. You guys have been watching me create with that and I just love it. But aren't these fun? So Life Happens, Coffee Helps, and I just did it 2 different ways, stamped it on a circle and then in the strip here. So those are really fun cards. But let's go ahead and get started on today's project. So I'm going to bring in my Versamat, but instead of laying it down like I normally do, I'm going to be doing some stamping. So I'm going to flip it over. There's a foam cushion on the back that is similar to what you would use this for that comes with the stamps, but now we have a big 12 by 12 piece. I am going to create some pattern paper and I'm stamping off the edge. So I want to protect that mat from getting ink on it. So I'm going to lay down my all-purpose mat here. So I've trimmed this piece of white daisy cardstock to 3.5 by 12, and then we are going to do a bunch of stamping, like I said, to create our own pattern paper. So this is going to be fun. My color palette, let me grab my ink pads. I have Toffee, Espresso, Desert Rose, and Shortbread. So I just thought that was a yummy coffee-inspired color palette. So now I can go ahead and get my acrylic stamps. They're not actually acrylic. They're high quality photopolymer, but we just call them acrylic because the blocks are acrylic. Fun fact, just in case you didn't know. But you definitely want to use a block that is appropriately sized for your stamp. So I'm actually going to switch this one to the larger block and then use the smaller one for my cup. And then let's see if the little bag of beans will fit on this little guy. It's a tight fit, but it's going to work. I actually like to lay my stamps down and then pick them up with the block. I just feel it works better for me. And then we'll mount the beans on the smallest block here. Using Toffee ink, I'm going to start with the largest element first to create my pattern paper here. So that would be the quote. And again, this one says, I don't need an inspirational quote, I need coffee. So I thought that was really funny. And you'll notice what I'm going to do is stamp off the edge. That's my first tip for creating pattern paper. It just makes it feel more like you cut a piece from actual pattern paper. And then you'll notice I'm creating almost like a triangle shape with that. We've staggered it, altered it, going back and forth from the left to the right. And then this little coffee cup here is the second largest image. So now I'm going to move to that and I'm angling it. You don't have to angle it, but I just thought that was kind of a fun, playful feel. And again, keeping that same principle, I'm just alternating it. I want it to appear very natural and random, but it's funny thing is it's not actually random. There's a lot of thought that goes into this. So again, I'm just kind of alternating that image back and forth and spacing it out fairly evenly each time I stamp it. I'm going to clean these off in between just to keep my workstation clean with my stamp chamois. Super handy. And now I'm going to grab the toffee again for my little bag of beans here, and then we will fill in the spaces with that. You can see why it makes sense to start with the largest and work your way down, because it's easier to fill in the smaller spaces with smaller images and give yourself more room when you're stamping with the larger ones. So we'll just add a couple of these. That looks about right. And remember, if you hate it, flip the paper over and start over again on the other side. It's just paper. It's okay, especially just plain cardstock like this. Just start creating. You can come up with some really fun custom pattern papers that nobody else will have, right? So now I'm going to switch to the espresso for my tiny little pair of coffee beans here. And then we're just going to fill in even further those empty spaces that we have on our pattern paper. And I know when I bring in my photos and embellishments, some of this will be covered up. So, it's okay. We can always kind of tweak it as we need to, as our design comes together. So I think that's it for the cute little coffee beans. For our next technique, I actually saw Janice do this on her channel, and it's brilliant. She called it reverse stamp coloring. You flip your stamp over so the side that is actually intended to create the image is now mounted to your block, and we're using the solid backside to fill in these shapes. I've done this technique with symmetrical stamps to fill them in, but never done like an abstract look where you purposely want it to not line up with the corresponding image. And it's super quick, and you'll see how much this adds to our pattern paper. And I love it. I think this is great technique, and I'll definitely be doing it again. And to finish this off, I'm going to add a little ink to the edges with espresso. Now, rather than just pick the paper up and swipe, I actually want to blend this onto the paper itself. So I'm using a little handheld blending tool. I have it laid down on my all-purpose mat, and that makes it really easy to start off the mat and work onto the paper itself, and you'll get a very smooth finish. And there you have it, a custom piece of pattern paper, perfect for coffee lovers. I'm flipping my Versamat over because I'm done with the stamping for now, and I'm going to bring in a sheet of white daisy paper to build my layout. This is going to create a border over on the left-hand side, and I do have 2 photos of my mom and I. We get together a couple times a week and enjoy a cup of coffee. And then for some added color, I'm bringing in these pattern papers from Hope and Kindness. It's Desert Rose on this side and the Sundance on the other. And then we have Toffee with this kind of white painted stripes, and then just a visual texture on the opposite side. Since I have a pretty neutral palette, I can really bring in any complementary color, but I love the way the Desert Rose pairs with the shortbread and the espresso. So I do want to map my photos. I cut an additional piece from that pattern paper. This is the Hope and Kindness coordinating cardstock, and that's going to look good centered just like that. There's no sense in wasting that pattern paper behind there, so I'm going to cut these into strips, maybe 1/2 inch. No, let's go 3/4 just in case. And I'll cut 2 of those, and then I'll cut another piece from that stripe pattern paper. The Hope and Kindness coordinating cardstock is just as good as the actual paper pack itself. There's just some gorgeous colors in there. And like I said, they have these kind of visual textures, and there's 2 different options on each side. It's just so pretty. So this is why I love using my Versamat. I've got those the grid marks all the way around, and that helps me get my papers lined up. Nobody wants crooked papers on their layout, right? You get it all put together and you're like, oh, that's crooked. Let me slide my photos back in place, then we can start embellishing. So from the fancy doily thin cuts, I cut a piece of peach cardstock, excuse me, and I'm going to slide that under the top here. These are so great for layering. I love working with these large elements. They just really make a statement. So for our third way of using our stamp set, we are going to create some embellishments. This is going to be my title piece. It says, "Today's good mood is brought to you by coffee," but I'm going to mask off the bottom word that says coffee using this Post-it removable labeling tape. And then we will just ink it up really quick. I'm using black ink, and then I can remove that mask and then stamp it on my little square here. And you'll see why I'm doing this here in a minute. It'll make sense. I'm going to cut that out with a stitched circle die, and then I also cut one in espresso just to mat that on to help it stand out against that white background. If I had stamped this as intended, Today's Good Mood brought to you by coffee, it would have been a great title piece and looked fantastic, but I want the title to be a little bit more of a statement on this layout, so I'm going to switch it up and I'll show you what I'm going to do here in a minute. But I do want to add some color to this circle because it's just kind of white, and again, this is going to help this kind of pop and just add a fun little visual element. This is the antique pink, which matches the desert rose nicely. It blends and coordinates, and I'm just highlighting the words good mood right here in the center. I did stamp my sentiment in intense black ink, which is alcohol marker friendly, so that I could color over the top like this. Now this is a piece of pattern paper. It's Harbour with peach polka dots, and I'm thinking I'm going to cut a tag from the little tags and tabs thin cuts here. We're wearing blue in the photo, and so Harbour is a little bit different. It's not really blue. It's more of like a bluish kind of greenish. I don't know how to describe it, but it's absolutely gorgeous. I love it, and it is complementing the colors in the photo quite nicely. So we've gone back to our little coffee cup here, and I'm going to shade this in. Again, I'm using antique pink for the cup, and I'm going to use muted brown for my coffee. It makes a nice latte color. I'm going around the outside edge with the darkest shade, and then I will extend that color into the center with the medium, and then fill in the very center with the lightest shade. So we'll just blend that in. I'm going to leave the little heart in the center white, just so that stands out nicely. And that looks good. And we're going to switch to the antique pink. Now I'm starting again with the darkest and using flick-like motions. I'm dragging the color from the outside edge in towards the center. And then I will repeat that process with the medium shade. And you want it irregular. And again, using those flick-like motions is really going to help this blend. And then we will finish off the center with the lightest. Now you can always go back and add a little bit more shading. So I'm going to put a little bit more dark around. It's buildable. You can kind of build on the color. So now I can use the coordinating die to cut that out, and we have a cute custom little stamped embellishment piece. So let's go back to the title. I've cut the word coffee from the slimline alpha dies, and I really like these because they're tall, but they're really kind of squished and skinny, so you can fit a lot of letters onto your layout. So you can do some bigger words, which is nice. I am going to add a little bit of color to these because I just cut them in white, and those obviously wouldn't show up very well. And so what I'm going to do is bring back in my stamp set here. Let me get those all faced the right side up. And this is that Harbour color, and we're going to use that same coffee cup, but again, we're doing the reverse side of the coffee cup. So we're using the back side to add color to our letters here. I am literally just tapping the backside of this coffee cup stamp down on my letters, and you will get inky. It's a little bit messy, but that's okay. That's part of the fun, right? And when I hold these up after they dry, you'll see what a really neat texture this adds to these letters. And I did cut a second set and glue those together for a little bit more stability. And then we'll just line them up right underneath the photo here. I did try this in toffee colored ink first because my original thought was like a coffee stained letter, but it just didn't, stand out enough. It just kind of faded away and didn't really do much for the layout. So I switched to the Harbour color, and that's just what it needed. Since I introduced Harbour in that little tag, I need to bring that color in elsewhere on the layout anyway. So this was a good solution for that. The layout definitely needs a little something up on the upper left here. So that is a Harbour circle, and it's just going to act as kind of a landing spot for some smaller embellishments. I have wooden arrows, and I spotted this one and I thought that's cute. That's really going to tie my title all together. So now it says Today's Good Mood is brought to you by coffee, and it all just kind of marries together. And then these cute little hearts, I have outlines, and then the inner portion, and we'll just layer a few of those around. Maybe there, I don't know, that one's a little too big. Let's switch it out for a smaller heart. And then I think I'm going to move these elements down just a bit to further connect them to the word coffee down below. Now you can see why I masked off the word coffee on that circle, because it wouldn't make sense to repeat it twice. So we're still going to continue with the reverse side of that little coffee cup. We are getting a lot of use out of this little coffee cup image here. Now you guys see me all the time using perfectly imperfect patterns, which is a background and texture stamp, and I absolutely love it. Those background and texture stamps are my go-to, but this is another option. So it's a completely different look, but we're just using the back side of this stamp set to add a little color to further highlight this embellishment cluster. I'm doing second generation stamping, so I'm stamping it off and then stamping it onto my layout, and that's giving it a softer look. And the lighting from my filming setup is kind of washing that out. It actually is a little bit more intense of a color in person. Hang tight, because I am going to switch up the embellishments quite a bit, so stay tuned for that. I do like to use these micro glue dots for adhering my little wooden shapes, and it works great for acrylic embellishments as well. So that's my go-to. Liquid glass does work as well, but I like these glue dots. They're just super quick and easy. Get our little arrow into place there. And now, thinking more about adding the Harbour color, I decided to add a few Harbour color beans, because why not? I want to introduce that color into this pattern paper, and the only way to do it would be the little beans. I'm going to bring in a piece of scrap paper here just so I can stamp off the edge. And we'll add a couple of these guys. And again, I can't emphasize enough, I always recommend turning your stamp, rotate it, flip it over left, right, alter it. And that just really helps it look a little nicer, I think. Using the tabs thin cut set, I did cut a little tab in espresso, and I'm going to pop that right up top here. And then from my stash, I have these Echo Park coffee themed chipboard accents. I was at a scrapbooking retreat and they were on the raffle table. So I don't know if it's something someone had for a long time and donated, or if they're still available, but surprisingly, the colors coordinate very well with my layout. That almost never happens. So I'm going to use them, because why not? The little coffee cup you see there is from the Coffee Helps stamp set. I just stamped that out and colored it in with the muted brown. And I'll tuck that little guy right up top there. Now I'm still looking at this layout, and I feel like right in this area here, something's missing. It's just it's okay, but I think it could be better. So I'm wondering if I just need to bring more of the Harbour color to the other side. So I'm looking at that. It's not quite right. Let's turn it and make it a continuation of the tag. And that just gives it a stronger kind of horizontal visual anchor. But I like my embellishments connected. So now I need to bump these down. That's how it goes. We just kind of move things around. And now I did glue those down, so there's a little bit of damage up on the paper there. I'm thinking I'll put a little Harbour colored doily and then a peach colored doily. These are the smaller ones from that same fancy Doilies thin cut set. And I'm liking that, but we need to camouflage that little spot that is torn from the paper. I don't know if you can see that right there. So I'm going to slide my tag there and grab another little saying from those chipboard accents. It says Coffee and Friends. And there, perfect. No one will ever know my glue dot ripped the paper. This is a little piece that says Mocha. I'll slide that there, and cute. I'm liking this. I think that this is what it needed. Like I said, it wasn't bad before, but I do think this is better. Let's go ahead and throw a dovetail tab or end into this tab. And then, like I said, it looks like a continuation from the tag on the other side. And then we can layer our embellishment clusters right over the top. So you can see all the different ways we use this one stamp set. We created a custom pattern paper. We used the backside of that cup to add a little color and texture stamping, some embellishments, and even added texture to our coffee title. How cool does that look? I challenge you to think about these techniques next time you're inking up one of your stamp sets. Everything I used for today's project is listed in the description box below. Next up is Julie, and be sure to check out all of the Creative Design Team videos that you can find in this playlist right here. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll catch you in the next video.